okay. You just do it. It turned out okay. And today we're talking about two competing land masses, two competing forces over one land mass, and who will come out on top twice.
Uh,
But first, introduction here. Who are you again? What do you
I
do?
am the N bead. I've shown up on here as like the venerable bead before. This is a continuation of the England stuff.
Yeah, Venerable bead, the Scythian bead, some other beads.
Yeah, I'm. This one's gonna stick. Okay, I promise.
Uh, oh yeah, uh, awesome. So, you're ready to get into some more ancient, ancient English history?
Yep. Well, that and some other things. At the beginning, really quick. But yeah. So this we're going to be talking about the ninth century in England, which is characterized by the rise of Wessex, as you can see on the screen here, which is one of the kingdoms. But before that, we have an update on Ukraine. Uh, so this last period has been punctuated by some big um, successes for Ukrainian forces, which has caused some political pressure back home in Russia for Putin. Uh, Essentially, he didn't have enough troops to man the entire line, and that's why he was able to get pushed out of Kharkiv. So on the 21st of September 2022, he does something that he said he wasn't going to do, which was general mobilization. It's supposed to be limited. I highly doubt that it's going to stay that way because I don't think it's going to be enough to man all of this, especially now that Ukraine is also getting more trained troops in, and it's just going to become more of a meat grinder.
So is he
Um,
getting? So this is like a desperation thing from him.
uh, yeah. He thought he could go in with the professional troops, take out Ukraine. Turns out he couldn't, so now he has to bring in more men because the Russian army isn't like the United States army. The United States army is a professional army first, and then yeah, we still have the Selective Service Act, but hasn't been used since Vietnam. Um, while the Russian army is more based on mobilization. So you mobilize your populace to war and only have a few professional troops that once the mobilization occurs can quickly train those mobilized units. So he tried to do it without mobilized units,
But
didn't work.
Ukraine kicked their butt.
Yeah, well, they fought harder than he thought they would. On the 30th of September 2022, just after this, he decides to annex the four oblasts that um, Russia had majority control in. Kherson Oblast in the south, which at the time, this was the only oblast in which they held the capital of the oblast. Zaporizhia Oblast, Donetsk Oblast, and Luhansk Oblast, which they actually had like majority control of at this point. Um, yeah, Kherson. Yeah. Only a couple days later, something happened to a bridge in Crimea. Um, so when Putin annexed Crimea, he did it in order to secure the port of Sevastopol, which is There's no other port on the Black Sea like it. It's a drowned river valley from the Ice Age, making it absolutely perfect
Oh,
for.
before we go on, for people that don't know, explain what an annexa, annexation is. And
Legally taking over the land of another country, essentially. Um, so when he annexed Crimea, he did it in order to get Sevastopol, which is the biggest port on the Black Sea, and essentially the only way for the Russian Navy to project power. However, it was geographically isolated from the rest of Russia, and seeing as they took it from Ukraine, Ukraine wasn't very happy and wasn't going to let them like send stuff over to it over land. So the only other way they could do it was building a giant bridge. So this is the Kerch Bridge that goes across the Kerch Strait. This was Putin's baby, the symbol of the annexation of Crimea. Um, and some dude took a big semi truck with a bunch of explosives and drove
but
onto
nope,
it and then blew it up.
no bridge today.
Yeah. They still haven't been able to get the railway bridge, which is where you actually transport like supplies through, operating, meaning that now there is only one way. Yeah, yeah, it fell. Part of it fell down. Yes, um, but so now there is only one. This further hampered Russia's position in Kherson, uh, because now there's only one route in which you can get supplies from, and it hurts their position in Crimea, of course. So when we last talked, the Kherson counteroffensive had just begun. Kherson is important because it is the capital of the Kherson Oblast. It was the only capital of an oblast that the Russians had conquered, and Ukraine really wanted it back. And it's in a very tenuous position because it's over the Dnieper River. So if you can bomb the bridges that were being used to um, transport supplies over the river. Yeah, an oblast is like a country or province, county or province. Yeah. Um, so if you could bomb these things and make them unusable, you can essentially make it hard for the army across the river to survive. And eventually, with multiple different blows onto their ability to supply their troops, the Russians decided it was better to leave, which is weird because you can actually see signs in Kherson saying Kherson will forever be Russian, kind of things, and it's like so they just annexed it like a month before, and then they left because they just couldn't hold on to it anymore. Um,
Uh, so
and this was really hard fighting. This area is not conducive to offense in a war. It's much better for defense. It's flat. There's no trees. So you're attacking enemy positions with no cover, which isn't good. A lot of people died. I know people who have lost friends trying to capture Kherson. Um, but if you go to the next picture, when the Ukrainians actually get inside, why isn't everybody mad that they just got conquered again? Why is there all these flags? Huh? Didn't they vote to join Russia?
it's almost like they think that themselves as Ukrainians.
Yeah. So a bunch of people came out. Were like, "Yes, thank you for." Oh, I, The Russians on their way out actually destroyed all of their like heating power and all of that, and they're like, yeah, we don't have any heat, but no more Russians. So they were very happy about this. So the next important battle that we kind of need to talk about is the Battle of Bakhmut. So the purple is what Ukraine got back during the Kharkiv counteroffensive. As you can see, Bakhmut used to be extremely important for taking over the Donbass, which is Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts. However, after losing all this purple stuff, it's not that important anymore. However, uh, the attack is being led by the Wagner Group, which is a mercenary group of ultra Russian nationalists. They're fascists. And they're trying to make a statement here at Bakhmut that the regular army couldn't do it, but we could, and we deserve to be higher up in the government and stuff in Russia. And this battle is also absolutely insane. If you go to the next thing, I'd like you to guess what war this is from, because
Wait 1 second.
yeah, these are Ukrainian defensive positions in Bakhmut, and
One or two,
we're just
probably.
huh?
Is that from one
What'd
or
you say?
two?
No,
One or two?
this is from the Ukrainian war. This is
Oh.
in Bakhmut.
Oh, the pictures like they know from the olden times.
Yeah,
If they are in
trench
color.
warfare is still alive. Um, and it's really bad. The, the Ukrainian defenders are struggling, but they're 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 giving the Russians hell. Um, at, during this time, oh yeah, Ukraine has been shelled to hell. Yes. So after all of this, the Russians have decided that they are going to they're going to
Keep on trying.
oh no, they're going to start attacking the civilians. They're going to ensure that civilians don't have heat during the winter.
That's why I said keep
And
on. They're going to keep on trying to say, "Hey, we're
uh,
conquering you. Give up already. Can you please give up now?"
yeah, rolling blackouts are happening. I've heard stories about homeless people dying on the street because they're cold. It's really bad, but the Russians aren't having a good time either because they're also cold as fuck. Um, uh, that's what and yeah, that's what they deserve, I guess.
And all this because some people in Europe want to join NATO.
No, don't even believe that for 1 second. This is all about Crimea and securing Crimea. As long as there is territorial disputes, a country cannot join NATO. Ukraine was not joining NATO ever. So this was all because Putin was losing control of Crimea. And he just really needs it.
I'm sure they definitely don't want to join anymore. I'm sure they definitely want to join now.
Yes, they definitely want to join now. And Finland and Sweden, which have been extremely neutral countries and trying not to be on one side or the other, are now screaming and crying, let us in to NATO now. Yes, because of Article 5, NATO countries, it's not on paper, it's more of like a principle thing. Because of Article 5, you don't want to countries are scared to bring in countries that have territorial disputes because you're more likely to you know cause a major war
Okay,
over Article 5.
okay, wait. Son. You're telling me there are territorial disputes in Europe? Since when did that
Oh,
ever happen?
uh, always since the beginning of time, I think. Article 5 is an attack against one, is an attack against all. It essentially says that, and there was a little bit of issues with this because Poland got hit by a stray missile. If one of the NATO countries is attacked, all the other NATO countries join in on absolutely bullocking the dude who attacked, like, Poland or whatever. So essentially, you don't want to bring in Ukraine when they're having territorial disputes with Russia, because the likelihood of war with Russia, which would be really bad because it's World War III, uh, exponentially rises, and so Ukraine was never joining. That's just a scapegoat to allow Putin to do his imperialism.
That's what that's what he it's either what he claimed or what his paranoid brain thought.
Yeah. All right. So now we
But
can get it.
but
Pardon?
speaking of invading powers trying to live in another land, let's talk about the Vikings. I'm glad.
Yes, they will eventually come up. So our goals for this talk about the ninth century England is explain why the Viking Age began, explain how the Viking Age affected England, explain the arrival of the Great Heathen Army, which was a big giant army of Vikings that came in and decided that they were going to stay and they were going to create their own kingdoms. Explain the rise of Wessex and one of the most famous English monarchs, Alfred the Great, and explain why Mercia failed while Wessex succeeded, not seceded. Oof.
Okay, real fast. I might be wrong. I usually am, but is this the first great since Alexander?
No, there's been a lot of greats, but this is the only English monarch to ever get the name the Great. It's not something they like to give their monarchs for some reason. So first, I want to talk a little bit about our main source for this period, because that's very important. The Anglo-Saxon chronicles are what chronicle a bunch of the Viking attacks and the events that lead up to this period, and it continues on afterwards as well. It's beginning to be compiled under the reign of Alfred the Great. So you can tell that it's going to be biased in favor of one kingdom, Wessex, of course. So it mostly only talks about um, how great Wessex is. There's Viking attacks elsewhere, but it doesn't give a crap because, why do I care about them?
Yeah,
They're not Wessex.
yeah. I guess he's important. I guess he can be important since I think even the current British monarch is descendant of him.
Alfred the Great, yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Well, the Wessex kings kind of get a little muddy, so I was just making sure. It misses some events and accelerates others, like the decline of Mercia. Mercia probably stayed a pretty powerful kingdom up until the arrival of the Great Heathen Army.
yeah.
It
Sorry, but I think last time we left off, I think it was either Mercia or Northumbrian was the big boy to play with in the seven kingdoms before.
Yeah, Mercia in the last century was the big boy, who was throwing its weight around Anglo-Saxon England. However, Mercia stays a big power up until it gets absolutely destroyed by the Great Heathen Army. Um, but the Anglo-Saxon chronicles make it out like Wessex absolutely was the dominant power by that time, which isn't really true. But yes, Mercia had lost a lot of its influence. It still probably controlled the London area somewhat jointly with Wessex, which is kind of weird. But it's nowhere near the power that it had in the 7th and 8th centuries. So let's go on to the economy of the 9th century. So the economy of the 7th and 8th century flowed around the Emporia. The Emporia begin to decline during this period, and it's not necessarily because of the Vikings. The Vikings may have sped up the process, but this is most likely because of increased centralization around nobility. You want to be near the nobility instead of in these cities away from them. So you're moving to more fortified locations um, around nobles.
Be like, huh. The king or duke or whoever's in charge here has all the soldiers around this area. Let's live around this area. That's all the soldiers are.
Yeah. Also, wealth gets concentrated into the churches as well. Um, and there seems to be a differing amount of coins between like Northumbria. I think East Anglia is very similar. They like low transaction. They had a lot of coins. They intentionally debased their coins in order to have more low transaction uh, interactions, while in the South they tried to limit the coinage to keep power in the nobility class and stuff like that. So the elites are becoming the focus of the economy in southern England. So let's explain why did the decline of Mercia. So after Chenwulf, the last guy from the 8th century, dies, uh, he his successor was named Ceolwulf. Ceolwulf dies pretty quickly, and after this, you have a bunch of civil wars in Mercia, and this might even be linked to the decline of London. Lundenwich, which was the Emporia, loses its importance um, in the decline of the Emporii. And London was the power base of the Mercians. So without this, and with multiple civil wars happening between three completely different families over the throne, it allowed for their subjugated kingdoms like East Anglia, Essex, Sussex, Kent. These kingdoms were now able to exert their own self-control and even ask for help against the Mercians from people like Wessex.
Yeah, and
As
London was never important ever again. It fades
there's
from
a reason
history.
why it's the capital. The other kingdom that was chomping on the bit to gain more power was Wessex under a king named Edgebert. If you go,
I forget. I think that next page.
yeah,
So I forget if I think I, I think I remember. I could be wrong. I think he might have been Alfred's either dad or great grandfather.
I think he was his great grandfather. He's an ancestor of Alfred, not the direct ancestor because this is a little bit earlier. But one of the yes, Edgebert. Uh, Old English spelling is funny. That does not say Egbert; it says Edgebert
Yeah,
because the Old English are fucking weird, bro. Um, so King Edgebert is the first king to start exerting control over the southern kingdoms.
What do you mean the old England English was thing? Modern English is hard too.
Yes, but to our modern sensibilities, that does not say Edgebert, which means bright edge, by the way. So I think that's kind of cool. Um, he essentially uses one of the sub kings of Mercia. I can't remember if it's Essex or East Anglia. They call for his aid against the Mercians, and he uses this chance to defeat the Mercians and kind of usurp control um, from Mercia. He even goes all the way up into Northumbria and subjugates them for a bit. And he's given the title by the Anglo-Saxon chronicles, the title Brittenvalda, which wasn't an actual title. It just was something that was given to English monarchs who essentially controlled all of England at various times. Bede uses it as well in his ecclesiastical history. So he clearly exerted a lot of power, and he actually begins solidifying more control on the southern Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, which would be Essex, Kent, and Sussex, instead of allowing local dynasties to control these kingdoms. He started trying to put his sons on the throne, and originally his plan was to divide the kingdom. However, it did not. It ended up not working out that way, and eventually you just get Wessex controlling the entire area by the time Alfred the Great becomes the king. So why Wessex over Mercia? So we have to understand the sort of the structures underneath these kingdoms. Mercia was originally a bunch of different groups of people that got progressively conquered by a central dynasty. And these kings from these different little kingdoms got to keep their roles, but as ealdormen, which is essentially like a governor. Um, they got to hold their positions in a hereditary sense. This means that Mercia was incredibly decentralized, and you have a lot of competing interests fighting over the direction of the country, the direction of wealth within that country, and the king, if he's not strong enough, can easily be overruled by these competing interests. And we do know that there were three families competing for the throne because I can't remember, but there were three different families that didn't have any interests in keeping the family, keeping wealth within one royal family. So it caused the kingdom to be incredibly fractured, having to spend a lot of resources on civil wars, stuff like that. Wessex, on the other hand, was more centralized. Ealdormen were appointed by the king, and if you were an important enough ealdorman, you'd become a ministeri, which was a position that held with it a lot of prestige, and you wanted that position.
Now,
So,
now is this the prequel to the term Earl, or that's something different?
yeah, that and the Norwegian, well, not Norwegian, the Norse term jarl, kind of mixed together into Earl. So yeah, so they're competing amongst each other to benefit the king so that they can gain prestige from the king. Also, Wessex was ruled by only one family with an interest in stability so that the family could keep its wealth and didn't lose out. Uh, they were called the Cherdichingas, which is a very weird name, but yet that means descendants of Cherdich, which was the mythical first king of Wessex. So a lot of what Alfred will later do is related to how he saw the church. He sees this period as a time of crisis. The literacy in Latin, which is extremely important to the church at this time, was severely lacking, and that even if you did know Latin,
Yeah, I
it
think
clearly wasn't good Latin.
even then, only the very only if you're really involved in the church or you're a high noble, even then, maybe even not even them know Latin. Only the select of the select.
Well, yeah, if you were like a monk, you'd know Latin as well because you're trying to preserve stuff. But you're losing this, and you're having to translate all of this stuff into Old English because they don't know Latin well enough. And Alfred was a man of learning. He loved his learning, so he sees this as a really bad thing. But there doesn't seem to actually be a loss in enthusiasm, so we don't really know why there's a loss. Yeah, so there's no real. We don't really know why there was this move away from Latin. It could be because the churches were usually led by people appointed by local lords that didn't really care about their positions as much, but the fervor towards Christianity is still there. They keep building churches, and they keep doing things that they see as necessary in order to fight off people like the Vikings, which come in. They do a lot of things that they do a lot of things to try to combat the Vikings in a religious sense, like, oh shit, we gotta go to Rome, we got a pilgrimage to Rome constantly, because if we don't, God will be mad at us and the Vikings will win.
Oh. So yeah, kind of like say that almost like what the Muslims do to Mecca.
Well, yeah, Rome is to Catholic Christianity what Mecca is. Not exactly, but kind of,
Yeah,
yeah. It's kind of,
yeah. Religion usually is.
yeah. So let's finally talk about the Vikings.
All right.
Why did the Viking Age begin? We
Yes.
see there.
Yeah.
What?
I was gonna say yes. Why did they decide, instead of conquering the land and stuff, to start around this time? I think around this time they start settling down here in England and in Normandy. They're like let's settle down now.
Yeah. So during this period, we can see political centralization begin in Scandinavia. Before this, it was a lot of decentralized kingdoms that weren't very population hungry. We do see a lot of population boom during this time in Scandinavia, which could have exacerbated this. In order to gain power in Scandinavia, you needed wealth. So you started going abroad to find this wealth, and then you'd take it back and you'd use it to gain power. Later on, we think the people that begin settling in Ireland, the British Isles, France, and all of that stuff were probably losers in the dynastic infighting. And so they decided, I have this wealth and I have these soldiers. I'm just going to go somewhere else and create my own new kingdom. And I I've never seen Vikings, but I think I remember seeing a bit of the beginning. Like they're acting like England didn't exist. Scandinavia and England had trading ties during this time. They knew that they existed. In fact, a lot of church people were mad at uh, Northumbrian noblemen for copying the beards and the hair of Scandinavians. So this idea that the Scandinavians didn't know England was there is kind of weird to me. They knew it was there. They wouldn't have gone there if they didn't. And instead of going after these emporia or fortified um, these fortified areas with wealth, they went after the religious institutions because there's nobody protecting them, but also a bunch of nobles have their children or their siblings set up in these religious institutions, so you can take these people and you can ransom them for even more money than what you got in the raid. uh, you, there were books like the Codex Aureus that they took away and ransomed the books in order to get even more money. So religious institutions were extremely rich, even though it doesn't seem at first like they were. Um, in this early period, it's sort of overstated how ravaging the Vikings were. The Anglo Saxons were able to fight them off every once in a while. Yeah, every once in a while you'd lose a king, but they were able to fight them off. And a lot of this is we've got God on our side. We've done all these things. We've done our penance and we can beat them. But as the decades go on in the 9th century, more and more and more Vikings are coming, and they're coming with more ships. Oh, shit. Finally, in the winter of 865, the Great Heathen Army appears. Uh, on the right, these are the campaigns that occur. It seems to be a loose confederation of multiple different kings, including a dude with a really metal name, Ivar the Boneless. Cool ass name.
But I bet it wasn't little.
Huh?
But I'm sure it wasn't. I bet you it wasn't literal though.
Uh, maybe. It'd be cool if it was, but yeah,
Like,
Ivar the Boneless was one of them. Multiple different Viking lords, I guess you could call them,
yeah,
coming
like,
from different areas. Ivar was known for operating in Ireland. Um, Later on, the Viking stories will try to tie all of these guys to Ragnar Lothbrok as his sons. I don't know about the history. I'm pretty sure he's a semi-legendary character, not um, strictly historical, and could have just been like made up to um, legitimize these dynasties that show up throughout the Viking world. They first attack East Anglia, and at first it seems like they're just here for tribute. They go up to York in 866. And it looks like Northumbria was in a period of civil war, so they were able to take this opportunity. They killed both of the claimants and put their own person on the throne. And then they're like, okay, let's go back to East Anglia, but this time we're gonna conquer it. And this is the first time you get Vikings starting to settle in England here in 869. And they even get powerful enough that they conquer half of Mercia, and you get two distinct entities in this area.
yeah. So instead of like grabbing this stuff and going back to where they came from. They're like, hey, why don't we stay here and keep the stuff here?
Yeah, exactly. These guys probably lost out in the dynastic game in Scandinavia. They've been going around France, Ireland, getting all this wealth. You know what? Let's just stay here, found our own kingdoms, and start using this wealth. And
And was this
Mercia gets, pardon?
say was this around the same time that Normandy was settled too?
Yeah, by a different guy, Rollo. Um, and Mercia gets divided between an English dynasty in the west and these Viking lords in the east of what becomes known as the Danelaw, because this is where the Danes live.
Yeah. I was to make a joke here. I was to make a joke. He says, "Well, I guess you don't worry about Rollo anymore because Rollo's descendants have nothing to do with England ever."
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But that comes later. Spoilers. In this time, Wessex has a bit of problem. There's some dynastic intrigues that happen. If you go to the next slide, because we're going to talk about the rise of Alfred the Great. There's some problems going on. There's like a succession of 3 different monarchs who are all brothers that all die. One is actually survived by a son who becomes a problem for Alfred later, but he's not going to be in this presentation. But Alfred is the one in 871 that comes to power. Yes,
Yeah,
dynastic.
yeah. I used to be all in the genealogy and stuff. I think like Alfred was the youngest, or maybe, or at least the only surviving, if the youngest, or just the surviving member of all his brothers and sisters.
Yeah, he was the youngest. And he comes to power in 871, which isn't a great time to come to power because you've got the Great Heathen Army rampaging all the way through England. And that sucks. And they decide to come into Wessex. They actually defeat him at the Battle of Wilton the same year he comes to power. Ouch.
Timing, it sucks.
Timing and exact tribute from him, but they leave. They go back to their power base in East Anglia. So he begins to try to increase his power base, but it doesn't really work because in 876, they come back one more time, bugger them again, leave, and then in 877, they decide they want to stay, and they nearly conquer all of Wessex. And these little marshes that you can see, they're a little lighter color. I guess I should have gotten a better map for this, but there's a little island there called Athelney, which is the last place that Alfred is able to have a power base. But he's able to gain his army back up, and in 878, he comes out of Athelney and defeats the leader of this Viking horde and is able to get them the fuck out of there for at least 20 years. No, 15 years. And this buys him breathing room to start to reform the kingdom of Wessex and the other kingdoms in southern England to start looking more like something we'd call England, but not really.
But not yet.
I think it's very important to note that before Alfred, the idea of a united Anglo-Saxon people did not exist. Alfred is actually incredibly important in creating this idea of an English people.
Does this go back to your country versus state debate when you were the Scythian Bede?
Uh, kind of. The idea of a nation didn't really exist at this time, but they're definitely like these people had more allegiances to their kingdoms than to an English identity. But Alfred the Great is going to sort of change that. and in his reforms. If you go to the next slide, please. Please. Alfred loved learning. There's a possibility that he was set for life in the church because he was the youngest son. We don't know about that. That's a possibility. However, he's also able to take the reins of power pretty easily. So
Yeah,
maybe
I think
not.
that yeah, I think that was I could be wrong, but I think that was usually for the youngest child, you know, since they probably had no chance of all ever gaining any real power. They're like, you just go do your church stuff. We got
Yeah.
five other people above you to be king or whatever. You know, you be get a little learner. Your brothers are all dead. Yes, you're king now.
Yeah. Um, and while he was a good warrior, he dealt with a lot of problems. I'm trying to remember. It's like an intestinal disease that he had that probably gave him a lot of pain at
Yeah.
so he preferred learning over all these other things.
Well, actually, that makes sense. You know, actually that kind of makes sense since he was um, settled to be in the church, and that's where all the learners went. You could, guess, guess it makes sense that he was one of their smarter kings instead of instead of just fight out just a straight out fighter.
Yeah. And he actually mourned the loss of Latin understanding amongst the church. Um, so one of his biggest programs is to encourage education. If you had to be in the church, you had to have an education. If you wanted to be an ealdorman, you had to have an education. He demanded a lot of his subjects at this time because he was like, you got to learn. You got to motherfucking learn. And he loved learning so much that he wrote his own books. We have them. So we actually can peer into the mind of Alfred the Great and what he kind of saw himself as. This he thought of himself as this more enlightened figure.
So, question: would his books be a primary source or not? Since it's more of a self
That'd be a
phrasing
primary
book.
source.
I was wondering that. I don't know if it was or not, since you know a book about writing about yourself. I don't know if that would be like a primary source or biased primary source.
All primary sources are biased. It's about realizing those biases. His books are more important for trying to figure out the mindset of Alfred the Great
Okay.
than they are for figuring out the history. I don't even think they were written about history. I think they were more theological books, but I can't
Okay.
remember. Um, in order to better fight off the Vikings, all of these red dots right here, these are fortified settlements that were founded by, not necessarily founded, but these locations that he, through the state, fortified and put soldiers into. So you actually start getting a professional army in England.
So
Uh,
this was the start of Wessex going from a little land in the corner to all of England eventually.
yeah, so he sets up these fortified settlements with their own troops, so that, and he tries to make sure that they're near waterways and important locations, so that if any Viking is ever seen, uh, this small group can initially engage and wait as more troops come in. Usually these would be like freemen that come together um, just for the time of war to come aid these professional soldiers. This actually does a lot to strain the economy of Wessex, and there's actually a lot of things to suggest that Alfred did a lot of things to extort taxes from religious institutions, funnily enough, which sort of made them mad at him. But in the end, he's still. I mean, this essentially saves Wessex, and builds a base from which his successors can form a new kingdom. He builds his law code off of the legacies of older rulers instead of completely making his own. Um, some of the important ones are Offa of Mercia from last time. One of his ancestors, Ina of Wessex. There was a guy, I can't remember. There was like a guy in Kent, I think. Oh, I forgot to say these fortified settlements are called bourgs. The origination of the modern term borough, or how we'd say it in America, a burg. But yeah, uh, burg just means fortified settlement, and you actually get a lot of different cities named that. Edinburgh, for example, is a burg. Um, Canterbury was a burg. All of that stuff. And finally, Alfred does a lot to create a combined English identity. And he uses different terms. He tries to use Angelkün, which means English person, of course. Another one that he falls onto is Anglo-Saxon. This is where we get that term first, Anglo-Saxon. And he becomes, instead of the King of Wessex, he takes the title the King of the Anglo-Saxons. So he's clearly trying to build in order to expand out. Uh, I don't know why they're called boroughs in England. They just say things wrong, I guess. I don't know, but yeah. Uh, they, I don't know why. That's something different, man.
That's a whole other episode.
that that's etymology, man. But yeah, it was burg. Um. So when we come back next time, we'll actually start working towards the Kingdom of England, the uniting, and talking a little bit more about
the
them.
journey of all of Alfred's descendants
Yes.
until we, I think, until we get to the the Canute the Canute invasions.
Oh, Kenneth the Great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. I can't pronounce his name either. Canute.
Yeah. Try to pronounce Hardacanute. Yeah. That's his son. But
Awesome.
yeah. So I hope that I did a little better. I tried a different presentation style this time, and I hope it was a little better.
I like it. Different ways of learning are always good. So, what are your holiday plans before we?
It's the bloody World Cup, mate. We're gonna be watching that, and then Christmas.
Is England still in it? Because I know America lost already.
No, they just got dumped out today. Actually, they
so,
lost to France today.
So England and America are both out.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Does anybody have any questions though? Shipfish.
And by anyone, it means Shipfish is the only one in the audience.
You got any questions?
No, I think you answered for me. Not for me. I think you answered all I know of. I know we discovered why the Vikings came. We discovered the little power balance between the last remaining of the last Anglo-Saxon kingdoms and the Danes. Oh, why was it called the Danelaw? Do we agree with
Oh,
that?
because the Vikings were called Danes by the English, and that's where Dane law was, like the laws of the Danes held sway.
Were they Danish?
Uh, Danish doesn't exist yet.
Okay, okay.
Alfred's moves set up increased, like the expansion of Wessex into what we would now call the Kingdom of England. Eventually incorporating the Danelaw. Interesting things actually happen in the Danelaw, which were actually very important for modern English language. It's why you say eggs instead of eiren, and I'm glad we say eggs instead of eiren. And it's also probably why English doesn't have a case system anymore, to try to better understand between Old Norse and Old English. That's a hypothesis, but yes. So England's going to become, the Anglo-Saxons are going to unite into a single kingdom, and it's going to be the biggest kingdom. Got the most land, has the least mountains to mess with agriculture. So it's going to be able to start asserting its dominance over especially Wales and a little bit in Scotland. But some things happen.
And we'll get to that next. We'll get to those next time.
Yeah, instead of Vikings, we get the descendants of Vikings coming in and saying, "Hey, I want to be king."
Well, for me, unless something that happened, this is most likely the last episode of this season. So, else happens. Congratulations, you are our season finale.
Oh, I'm very important then. I'm very important. We are around the 880s and 890s. We're probably gonna pick up. Where are we gonna pick up? The next time we might actually, we're actually gonna talk, because this time we end with Alfred, and the next chapter, while it's going to focus on the creation of England, it's also going to focus on the Scandinavian settlements in the Danelaw. So around 880s, 890s.
So,
The
are you thinking? I was gonna say, are you thinking January or February?
I want to challenge myself. January.
All right.
Book fell.
And then challenge myself. Then you fall down. Yep. Yep. We started this season with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and we ended it with the Wessex. Totally compatible. Totally compatible subjects.
Yeah. Also, I hope Morocco does well.
Is that your new pick to win it all?
No, I'm going Leo Messi, Argentina. Let's go Argentina, but it's going to be quite interesting. It's Argentina versus Croatia, and France versus Morocco. That's a very interesting World Cup lineup. But that's coming back on Tuesday.
Well, good. Well, good luck, Argentina.
Good luck. Yeah, good luck, Morocco too. I mean, I think this is like the furthest an African country has gone in the World Cup ever. So good luck to them as well. Screw France. They already won it in 2018. They don't need it again.
We'll see y'all next year. And remember, never stop learning and enjoy the randomness. We'll see you next time.